On July 29th, a deposit is going to appear in your bank account that looks different from the one that arrived last month. If you are a Canadian senior receiving old age security, something changed this month. The payment amount increased. A threshold that determines how much of it you are permitted to keep shifted quietly in the background. And for certain people watching this right now, the July 29th payment will not show up at all. 3 separate things moved simultaneously, all within the same week. And virtually no one received a clear explanation of what those changes actually were. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through your new payment amount. Exactly what your old age security and your guaranteed income supplement are worth starting this month. I'm going to explain the new threshold the government uses to recover a portion of it. And I am going to describe the single straightforward error that is currently causing payments to stop entirely for seniors who have done absolutely nothing else incorrectly. And I will tell you right now, it is that last item, the stopped payment, that I most need you to understand, because it is the one that can be corrected, but only if you are aware it is happening. My name is David Chen, and I spent 14 years working inside Canada's Retirement Benefits Administration. The pensions, the documentation, the rules that quietly govern how seniors receive their money. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not here to sell you anything. What I do on this channel is take the policy changes that are written to go unnoticed and present them in straightforward language so that you hold on to every dollar you have coming to you. So let us begin with the positive development, because there is one, and it is the change that touches every single person currently receiving old age security in Canada. Your OAS increased this month. Every 3 months, the government is required to adjust these payments to reflect changes in the cost of living, inflation, the price of food, housing, and daily essentials. The adjustment now in effect for July, August, and September of this year represents an increase of 1.2%. A single quarterly increase of 1.2% may not sound significant, but here's what it means in actual dollar terms. If you are between 65 and 74 years old, your maximum old age security payment is now approximately $752 per month. If you're 75 or older, that figure is higher, approximately $827 per month. That difference is worth noticing because a substantial number of people are unaware it exists. When you reach 75, your old age security becomes permanently elevated by roughly 10% compared to what someone in their late 60s receives. That adjustment was introduced several years ago on the basis that seniors in the oldest age groups tend to have drawn down their savings more significantly and rely more heavily on these government payments. If you crossed the 75 threshold recently, your payment should have increased at that point. If it did not, that warrants a call to Service Canada. Those are the updated maximums now in effect, reflected in the payment arriving on July the 29th. If you total all 4 quarterly adjustments over the past year, old age security has increased by just over 2% across the previous 12 months, happening quietly in the background without a single piece of correspondence arriving at your door to inform you. So the first action when that deposit lands is a simple one. Look at the actual amount. It should be slightly larger than what arrived last month. And if it is not, that is meaningful information we are going to address directly. Because here's the reality. The OAS increase is only one of 3 things that changed. And in terms of impact, it is the smallest of the 3 for many people. The second change is more significant for a large portion of recipients, and it is the one capable of moving your monthly income by several $100s in either direction. That change involves your GIS, the Guaranteed Income Supplement. For those unfamiliar with the name, the GIS is the additional tax-free payment the government provides on top of old age security for seniors with lower incomes. If you receive it, it frequently represents the difference between financial difficulty and genuine stability. And here is the critical element that the majority of recipients do not fully understand about the GIS. It is recalculated completely from the beginning every single July. Not once at the time of retirement, every year without exception. And the recalculation is based on a single input, the income you declared on your tax return for the previous year. So the GIS payment you are receiving from now through next June is built entirely on your 2025 income, the return you submitted this spring. Consider what that actually means in practice, because this is where the impact becomes personal. If your income last year declined, perhaps you reduced part-time work, perhaps an investment stopped generating returns, perhaps a spouse passed away, and the household income contracted, then your GIS this month could be higher, sometimes considerably higher, because the government now sees reduced income on your file. That additional money may be there, waiting for you without your awareness, but the adjustment works in the opposite direction as well. If your income last year increased, perhaps you made a withdrawal from RRIF, perhaps you sold an asset, perhaps you received a lump sum payment, your GIS this month could be reduced or eliminated entirely. If you were not anticipating that, the smaller amount landing in your account can be a genuine disruption. The current maximum GIS for a single senior is approximately $1,120 per month. That money is completely tax-free. It does not factor into your taxable income. It is yours without any tax obligation attached to it. When you combine that with your old age security, a single senior with limited other income can be receiving in the vicinity of $1,875 per month from these two programs together. That is a meaningful amount of money, and it is exactly the kind of figure worth understanding precisely, which is the purpose of this channel. Let me put a concrete example on this because the swing in either direction is what tends to catch people unprepared. Consider a woman, I will call her Patricia, living on her own in Sudbury, 71 years old. In 2024, she did some part-time administrative work through the winter months, a modest amount. This year, she stopped. When Service Canada recalculated her GIS this July based on her 2025 tax return, they found her income had decreased, and her supplement increased by more than $100 per month. Patricia did not submit a separate application for that increase. She did not complete any additional paperwork. The adjustment happened automatically because the annual July recalculation finally reflected her reduced income. Now reverse the situation. Her neighbor, the same age. I withdrew $8,000 from a RRIF last year to cover necessary home repairs. Same July recalculation, but with higher reported income. So his GIS came down. If he was not expecting that reduction, the smaller July payment was a cold surprise. Identical rule, identical month, opposite outcomes. That is the nature of the GIS. It is always looking back 1 year at the income you have already declared. And this same dynamic applies to spousal and survivor benefits as well. If you are between 60 and 64 and your partner receives the GIS, there is a benefit called the allowance. If you have lost a spouse, there is the allowance for the survivor. Both are income tested. Both are recalculated the same July based on the same 2025 return. And both can be suspended for the identical reason the GIS can be suspended, a point we are about to address in detail. So that covers two of the three changes. Your OAS is higher. Your GIS has been recalculated based on last year's income. But there's a third element that shifted. A quiet threshold that the majority of people have never heard named. And this one is most relevant to those of you who have built a reasonable level of income in retirement. It is called the OAS recovery tax. Most people refer to it simply as the clawback. Here is how it functions in plain terms. Old age security is not an unconditional entitlement. If your income reaches a sufficient level, the government begins recovering a portion of it. 15 cents returned for every dollar of OAS once your income exceeds a specific threshold. It is not counted. It does not appear as income. Two payments arriving in the same bank account on the same date, treated in completely different ways by the tax system. This is exactly the kind of distinction that leads seniors to conclude the entire system is too complex to engage with. And that conclusion, that it is simply too complicated, is precisely what costs people money. It is what prevents someone from claiming a GIS they are entitled to. It is what leads someone to stop filing a return because they assume it serves no purpose. None of this is actually too complex. It has simply never been presented in language designed to be understood. That is the entire purpose of this channel. So now you have the three changes that took effect this month. Your OAS increased, your GIS was recalculated based on your 2025 income, and the clawback threshold moved. If you are sitting there thinking the logical next step is simply to wait for July 29th and check the deposit, you are correct. But there is one more matter I committed to covering at the beginning of this video, and it is the one I most need you to retain, because unlike everything else discussed here, this one can stop your payment entirely, and it has no connection to your income level whatsoever. Here it is. Every one of these recalculations, the GIS, the supplemental benefits, all of it, depends on a single prerequisite above everything else, that you filed your tax return for the previous year. That is the entire trigger. Service Canada does not estimate your income. It reads the figure directly from the return you submitted to the CRA. If you did not file your 2025 return, the one due at the end of April, Service Canada has no income figure to base your recalculation on. And when that happens, they do not approximate and continue paying. They stop. Your GIS can be suspended beginning this month. Frozen. And I want to be direct about who this most commonly affects because it is not who most people would predict. It is very frequently the seniors with the lowest incomes, the people who have no tax owing and who therefore conclude, quite reasonably, that there is no need to file a return. That conclusion is the problem, because even if you owe nothing, even if your income is minimal, that tax return is the document that unlocks your GIS every single year. Fail to submit it, and the benefit you depend on most is the first one to stop. Let me make that concrete, because this situation is far more common than it should be. Picture a man, I'll call him Robert, living in a smaller community, 78 years old, a modest pension, his GIS, and nothing else. Robert owes no tax. He has not owed tax in years. so at some point he quietly stopped filing a return. There seemed to be no reason to continue, and for a period of time, nothing changed. Then this July, his GIS payment simply did not arrive. No communication he could interpret clearly. No telephone call. Just a payment that was absent, and a man looking at his account balance trying to understand what he had done wrong. The answer was nothing, except the one thing no one had ever explained was essential. He had not filed. Robert is not negligent. Robert is precisely the person this requirement affects most unfairly. The low-income senior who correctly determined he owed no tax and incorrectly concluded that meant he had no obligation to file. And here is why this matters even for those who believe none of it applies to them. That tax return is not just the mechanism that activates your GIS. It is the key that opens access to a range of other entitlements. The GST and HST credit, a quarterly payment that stops without a filed return. Provincial credits and supplemental benefits, many of them connected to the same document. Federal climate payments, where still in effect, all flowing from that one submission. A single unfiled return can quietly cut off 4 or 5 separate income streams simultaneously. And most people never identify the connection until the payments have already stopped. So if your payment on July the 29th is absent or substantially smaller than expected, do not panic and do not assume the reduction is permanent. The most frequent explanation by a considerable margin is a tax return that was not submitted. And the correction is exactly what you would hope. You file the return. As soon as your 2025 return is submitted, Service Canada can complete the recalculation and, in the ordinary course, restore your GIS. And critically, they can issue back payments for the months you missed. The money has not been forfeited. It has been held in suspension. But nothing is released until that return is processed. So if this describes your situation, if you know you have not filed, the most valuable action you could take following this video is to get that return submitted this week, not at some point next month. This week. And if completing it independently is not realistic, free tax preparation assistance for seniors on modest incomes is available in most communities through volunteer clinics. Someone will sit with you and complete the filing at no cost. As for checking your status without spending an extended period on hold, if you or a family member are comfortable online, a My Service Canada account allows you to view your current OAS and GIS amounts, your payment history, and whether anything has been flagged on your file. If online access is not your preference, a phone call to Service Canada accomplishes the same thing. Calling mid-morning on a weekday tends to involve shorter wait times, and having your social insurance number available before you dial will move things along. Ask 2 specific questions. What is my current payment amount, and is there anything on my file that is holding up a payment? That second question is the one that will surface an unfiled return if that is the issue. Here is the complete summary, kept brief by design. When your payment arrives on July 29th, look at the actual amount and compare it to last month. If it increased modestly, that is the quarterly adjustment working as intended. If it decreased or is absent, ask yourself one question before anything else. Did I file my 2025 tax return? Because in the overwhelming majority of cases, that is the explanation, and submitting the return is the solution. If you are a lower income senior who has never applied for the GIS, this July recalculation is a natural moment to determine whether you now qualify. Your income may have declined enough to open eligibility, and it is income you would otherwise not receive. And if your income places you near the $93,454 clawback threshold, it is worth sitting down with your numbers and understanding exactly where the recovery begins, because deliberate planning around that line can preserve a meaningful amount of money. 3 things changed this month, all reflected in that single payment on the 29th. Your old age security is now approximately $750 monthly between ages 65 and 74, and approximately $827 at $75, and older your GIS was recalculated on your 2025 income, with a single senior maximum now near $1,123, and the clawback threshold moved to $93,454. But of everything covered here today, the item that carries the most practical weight is the most straightforward one. If your GIS stops or decreases unexpectedly, check whether your tax return was filed. For the seniors who depend most on this income, an unfiled return is the most common reason a payment disappears, and it is entirely correctable. The government is not going to reach out and walk you through any of this. These adjustments occur in the background, and it falls to you to notice them. The most effective thing you can do is exactly what you're doing right now. Paying attention, knowing your amounts, and understanding where the problems arise before they affect you. If this was useful, subscribe, because every week this channel covers another one of these changes in plain language, so you always know what is happening to your money before it catches you off guard.